Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Do you ever get to the end of a movie where the hero had to make a difficult choice, and all you want to do is talk to people about whether they made the right one?
Watch an episode of Star Trek and spend the next few days thinking about the rights of synthetic beings like Data and the Doctor. I became a co-host of the Superhero Ethics podcast because I love those questions, and the people at Wendy's are tired of hearing me talk about them.
We're not a review podcast. We're more interested in questions the characters face and how different works approach similar questions. Sometimes we'll even go behind the camera, talking about how on-screen media gets made and how that affects what questions get asked, which ones don't, and who gets to ask them.
We hit a wide range of media: movies, TV shows, books, and video games.
You can find us under Superhero Ethics wherever you listen to podcasts or go to theethicalpanda.com. But you can also do far more. We love listener feedback and will happily talk about your questions or comments on air, and members get special bonus content.
Hashtag not sponsored by Wendy's.
What's up, Supernatural superfans? I'm Chrissy Lenz.
And I'm Nate McWhorter.
And we're the host of
Gang That Drink,
a supernatural drinking game podcast.
It's the podcast where we make up drinking game rules for a favorite episode of our favorite show, Supernatural.
We recap the episode for you and let you know how all the rules played out.
Then we let you know the drinking game rules for the next episode, so you can play along.
Plus, members get every episode early and ad-free,
with some extra bonus content chit-chat at the end of each episode as a member exclusive.
So download Gank That Drink, a supernatural drinking game podcast, wherever the finest podcasts are available.
And or become a member at truestory.fm/gankthatdrink.
And when you're out there in the world saving people and hunting things,
you know, the family business.
Keep the Gank That Drink motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and party on,
dudes.
Hooked on you, baby, you're golden. Time moves, I never noticed. Just can't get enough. Got me wonderstruck.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Make Me a Nerd with Mandy Kaplan. I'm Mandy Kaplan, spoiler alert, and it is my mission to explore the worlds of sci-fi and fantasy and gaming and comics and all things that are considered nerd culture that I have always been intimidated by and perhaps didn't feel I was smart enough to keep up with. But all of that is in the past because here I am becoming a nerd. I feel it. I'm getting geekier by the minute. I'm finding things I absolutely love, things I can't get enough of, and I'm finding where my limits are and what things just are a bridge too far for me and I can't quite go there yet. Baby steps, everybody, baby steps. Look, I'm not going to make you watch a reunion of the Housewives right off the bat. I'm going to ease you in. I'm going to take it gentle, and that's what my guests are doing with me in the nerd world. And today's guest is no exception. They are the host of the podcast Star Wars Generations and Superhero Ethics. So it's like a twofer. Both of those are in the True Story family of podcasts, which Make Me a Nerd is a member of as well. This is a person I don't know. Be gentle with me, Matthew Fox.
Hello, so glad to be here.
The ethical panda yourself.
That is my nom de plume online. The Ethical Panda podcasts are part of True Story. And I'm really excited about this, especially because I will say I am happily a geek, but I also often feel quite intellectually outmatched in those circles because I am not a science person. I'm not a math person.
Okay.
I am liberal arts as they come. While I will watch a lot of Star Trek and a lot of Star Wars, when I need a break, I'll turn on Love Island. So I'll chat Housewives with you at some point too.
Wow. Wow. The truth comes out right off the bat.
Yep.
Look at us finding common ground.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Well, I don't even go as far as Love Island, so you are mainstream trash, my
it's
friend.
when I need the trash, you know. So.
Oh, well, yeah, we all have it. Where did all of this start for you? I like to ask, how deep does your nerd river run?
So for me, oddly enough, it starts with my mother.
Okay. Not
My
odd
mom,
at all.
my mother was not really a nerd. She was a lawyer. She was a civil rights activist, amazing person, passed on a few years ago.
I'm sorry.
But one of her favorite TV shows was Star Trek,
Mhm.
the original. I'm on the older side. And when I was a kid in the early and mid 80s, we would often sit down and watch Star Trek episodes when it was in syndication.
Mhm.
And she didn't care about the spaceships or how did warp drive work or this laser or that laser. What she cared about was how were they using science fiction to take the problems of that current time, 1960s America, 1960s the
Mhm.
world, and mirror them back. And
Mhm.
so she would sit with me and we'd watch an episode and then we'd have a snack or a meal, depending on what time it was. And, it was on the weekend or something. She worked all day. But
Like what kind of snacks, Matthew? What kind of snacks?
um I liked peanut butter sandwiches. I was
Okay.
definitely a lot of those.
All right.
Didn't my love of cheese didn't start till later, I think. So probably a lot of peanut butter.
Okay.
Crackers, things like that. But
Okay.
and she'd ask me about like, what do you think this was about? And like, does it remind you of any modern situations? And that has always been the reason I love science fiction.
Mhm.
Not I love my friends who are so into like this ship can go warp 8.6 and this ship can go warp 8.8. That's not me.
Right.
What I love is how does this story make me think about my own world, my own situation? And that can be anything from like a specific political issue to just exploring ideas of consciousness and what
Mhm.
does humanity mean in a world with all these things. And so I think that's what's always gotten me involved. And I've since then followed that river into Star Wars. My mother used to joke that we had a Betamax to really date myself. But my mother used to joke that she didn't ever need to have a nanny or a babysitter because if she had to go out, she would just put A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie, into
Yep.
the Betamax, and I was not going anywhere. I would
Sure.
just sit down and so yeah, I went to that, and then I got really into gaming. So which have another topic we'd be happy to talk to you about another time.
Mhm.
And I think for me, the podcasting started when about 8 years ago, I realized that when I was trying to talk to people about important political or social or cultural issues, I was often referencing things from the science fiction that I knew was a common ground with people and be able to say, like, okay, well, why does Captain America do this?
Mhm.
How do you feel about what Darth Vader does here? And so that's kind of me, what my whole idea with podcasting is to look at those things and say, what does this teach us about our own world? What does this teach
Right.
us about, how we live day to day?
Well, I love that you found something in it that other guests of mine have not brought up. A
Hmm.
lot of my guests have brought up the idea that, well, I was made fun of at school or I wasn't athletic, so I turned to these superheroes and to these escapist things to dream of being able to fly into outer space and
Yeah.
escape. You saw this ethical question in each thing you were watching or these ethical issues that you could grab onto and really discuss and that lit you
Yeah,
up. Very
definitely.
cool. And
Very
I'm
much so.
sure other people watch for the special effects and that lights them up or for
Yeah.
the math and the science. So these entities really possess so many things for all people.
They really do. And it's,
Yeah.
I think it's good that it's not universal. I think I love a good lightsaber fight. They're fun to watch
Mhm.
for sure. But it's the, the things that I really love are the ones that, make me think about ethics or just humanity or just, how would we change our understandings of gender or sexuality, meeting a species that had multiple genders, or which I think humanity does. That's another story. But
Right.
yeah, there's such a, I feel like to take any question you're thinking about and put it in a very different context is a way to help you think. And that to me, that's more than anything what science fiction does.
And I think, not to go too deep, but like children's books are really
Mhm.
allegories for life,
Oh yeah.
questions and emotions and things. But you wrap it in a very hungry caterpillar. You don't have a book,
Yeah,
for a
exactly.
3-year-old that's like, hey, listen, we need to discuss this.
Yeah.
You put it in these other packages. So it's digestible and speaks to people in different ways.
For sure. For sure.
So knowing this about you now, as I'm getting to know you, I fully understand why you chose the Orville,
Mhm.
which for those who don't know, I had heard of it, but I
Right.
did not know what this was. This is a Seth MacFarlane series that was on Fox from
It was originally on Fox and then it moved to Hulu for its third and last
Hulu.
season.
which you feel a difference
Yeah, very much so.
in how far they could go once it was streaming. Freed from the network shackles. But what do you love about the Orville? What made you choose it?
So, and I would say I'm one of a lot of people who originally heard Seth MacFarlane was doing it and said, no, thank you, because
Okay.
I'm not a big Family Guy fan. There's often a kind of sophomoric humor in it that
Mhm.
like is just not
That's
my
what I
thing.
love.
And it's great to love that. It's just not my thing. And sometimes it can get into kind of like areas I'm not loving. But people kept telling me how good this show was, especially after the third episode, which is the first
Mhm.
one that I had you watch. And it's that I think, first of all, it is a love letter to Star Trek. And
Mhm.
have you watched much Star Trek? Is that one thing that has been kind of ticked off your list as you went?
I did. I watched 3 episodes of Next Generation and the new one and something else. I haven't ever watched the
The original.
original with Captain Kirk.
Makes
But
sense.
I wrote the phrase love letter to Star Trek on my notes. I can't find it. But
Yeah.
when you said love that letter to Star Trek, I was like, yep,
Yeah. And it's
we match. There's a point for matching.
perfect. And like any good love letters, there's a lot of it that's kind of parodying in some fun ways. But I think it really makes an attempt to pick up that idea that Star Trek had of how can we try to look at the issues of the day.
Mhm.
And so and there are some that are fairly subtle
Mhm.
or kind of very generalized. Like there's an episode we didn't watch where a more advanced a more advanced alien species captures a few members of the crew and puts them in a zoo, which
Mhm.
kind of just at first you're like, that's horrible. Wait a minute.
But that's what we've done.
Yeah,
Right.
if we're like the equivalent of chimpanzees to them, then like, yeah. And so there was an episode about a whole planet that decides everything based on like social media likes. And so that's kind of a broad thing.
Yep.
And then there's like, some of the episodes that I had you watch, which one of them is about religion and culture. And the other is with a weird twist, very specifically about transgender issues and things like that.
Yes.
And yeah, to me, I think that's to me, it really is picking up that idea from Star Trek and saying like, okay, in a modern day, changing some things from Star Trek, but really holding some things very close. How can we do this differently? While also having
And with humor.
Yes, with
Which
a
is-
lot of humor.
That's going to always hook me in. If you
Yeah.
can make me laugh out loud, you've got grace to do
Mhm.
whatever you want. And I am a big Family Guy fan. I am particularly a big Ted fan, the movies, but then the
Mhm.
series that just came out rocked my world. I laughed
Really? Okay.
so hard. Not for you?
I did love the first Ted movie. I kind of hated myself for loving it, but I did love it. And
Yeah.
the second one was not for me. I didn't even know there was a show, but I might check that out.
It's on Peacock and
Okay.
it's hilarious. And it features, I can't get enough of him, Scott Grimes, as
He's very
the
fun, yeah.
wildly inappropriate
Mhm.
male figure of the family. He's an uncle. He's not really a dad. Or I guess he's a dad to one. Anyway,
Yeah.
hilarious. And I have a Scott Grimes story that I'll save for later. But was the Orville a hit? Was it critically accepted? I got some mixed messages when I...
So I think that it had trouble finding itself for a while because
Mhm.
one of the things that I learned, and you may have even noticed this just in the third episode and the 11th episode of the first season, part of why Seth MacFarlane wrote this was, and this is what he's talked about in interviews a lot, he liked doing the Family Guy humor, but he was feeling kind of stuck by that. Like he
Mhm.
wanted to show that he had other things. And
Mhm.
the first couple episodes, apparently the producers and like higher ups were saying, no, we hired you because you're Seth MacFarlane. Give us Seth
Sure.
MacFarlane humor.
And there is a lot I watched the pilot.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I just wanted to get my feet wet. And then
Yeah.
I went on to the episodes you told me to watch.
Right.
but
yeah,
There
there's
is some, fart humor.
there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And there's an extent to which I think it makes the show a little bit more relatable. Like one thing that's been pointed out is that no one has any idea if people on Star Trek use the restroom because it just never ever comes up.
Sure.
And so, the fact that like, yeah, they do that. They like want to drink soda on the bridge, things like that
Right.
comes up. But in later episodes, I think they're still quite funny, but his humor changes a lot as far as I
Mhm.
understand, because the network kind of gave him some hands off. And I think some people watched those first couple episodes who weren't necessarily Family Guy humor folks and didn't like it.
Mhm.
But then I think in later episodes, a lot of people did start to like it, especially a lot of Star Trek fans. I think have really kind of adopted it as another version of Star Trek.
Well, if he's coming from a more frat boy mentality with Ted and
Mhm.
Family Guy, that's a lot to overcome to win
Yeah.
over nerd, and I say nerds with reverence. It's not an
Yeah.
insult at all. It's, Star Trek nerds are
Mhm.
not only resistant to what are you doing with our genre, but you're the frat boy guy. You're
Right.
so two strikes against him. And I personally loved the pilot. If we
Yeah.
can talk about it for a second. Um, the premise is the same as nearly everything I'm watching in this podcast, right? A down on his luck guy has to gather a ragtag team of recruits to go on one journey to surmount, to overcome the
Mhm.
odds. And I just did Agatha all along. That's that
Yep.
story. It's like that's everywhere, but he does it with some Seth MacFarlane laughs.
Yeah.
I put a D on his name. There's no D, but he gives you real laughs. And I said, oh, here's my love letter. It's not really a parody. Spaceballs is a parody of Star
Mhm.
Wars. This is a love letter where it's basically picking up where I think Star Trek left off. Roddenberry, right? That's
Yeah.
the guy who
Gene
created
Roddenberry.
it.
Yep.
But it's saying we're going to keep doing what they were doing and we're going to add humor.
Yeah.
But the stories are very heartfelt. The characters have real moments and real gravitas. And I was just down for it. I loved the
I
pilot.
love that. I love hearing that.
Yeah. Then the first one you assigned me
Mhm.
after I did my extra credit first was season 1, episode 3, about a girl. And the lame little Wikipedia blurb is Second Officer Bordis and his mate Clyden debate whether their child will receive a controversial sex reassignment. And they are Mocklin. They are a different race.
Right. They're from Moklis, and they are a race that is we are told all male. And so both of
Yes.
them are male.
Yep.
But that's considered just what is natural in the world because their species is entirely male, and then this baby is born who is female.
Yes. And Seth MacFarlane plays Ed Mercer, Captain Ed Mercer. He's supposed to be like the Kirk of the group. And I just have to, I won't do this throughout, but I laughed so much at so many things. But he wrote, listen, he said, having a vagina doesn't give you a lisp, depending on how you use it. And I just couldn't stop laughing. So I had to write that down and give credit for my big LOL hard. So yeah, it's this couple, Clyden and Bordis, debating whether or not to gender reassign their baby daughter, and everybody else is saying, "Don't do it.
Right.
Let her grow up. Let her decide what she wants to be."
And one of the reasons why I really love this episode, and this was one of the episodes, this was the episode that got a friend of mine to suggest it, because I do think that, and this may be unfair, but like often with frat boy humor, there's an association of maybe we're not going to take ethical issues so seriously, or maybe we're not going to worry about like who we offend with our jokes. And I think there's still some of that, but clearly Seth MacFarlane has a very specific, like, social, political ideas that he wants to raise. And so, and what I'm getting at is like, clearly this is an issue about gender and about sexism and about how
autonomy over your own body and
etc. But it's also about what do you do when a completely different culture that is alien to you has values that are not the same.
Right.
And I remember being almost annoyed by the episode because it's like, I so clearly want to feel completely on the side of because the two parents wind up having different opinions.
Yes.
And I want to be on the side of Bordis, the one who's saying, no, I'm okay doing this. I don't want to do this operation to my child. Let's raise her as a girl. And the other one, Clyden, is so clearly saying to everyone else, no, this is our culture. You don't understand our culture. And, I think that's a thing that a lot of us have to think about a lot is like we see things in other cultures that bother us or strike us as weird.
Right.
And I don't think it's right to say we get to dictate to everyone. I also think it's right to say, well, every culture is different and I'm never going to have judgment. Like, it's a struggle.
Right. they throw in Judaism and are you circumcised, and
Mhm.
millions and millions of people just circumcise, but that's against, the baby doesn't stand up and say yes please.
Right.
And my husband and I debated whether or not to circumcise our son,
Mm.
and is that fair to make that decision for him before he can make it himself.
Right.
We ultimately did, but uh they blurred this in a way that I admired. And like you said, you go in with a preconceived way of thinking. Well,
Mhm.
I know how I feel about this,
Right.
right? And then he presents both sides in passionate ways that blurred it for me. And I read interviews where he said he got tons of praise and tons of backlash.
Yep.
And he said, maybe I would do it differently now. And he didn't specify
Yeah.
in what I read. He didn't say, here's what I regret saying, or here's how we should have approached it. But I was very impressed with how moved I was and
Yeah.
how invested I was. I was invested in aliens. That doesn't happen, Matthew.
No, I get that. And like I said, this was the first of the episodes I ever watched. And I was so
Mhm.
shocked that I this episode moved me to tears, as did a number of others. And
Mhm.
well, I think, I don't think it winds up being a both sidesism. I think that the show and the characters have a clear sort of like, this culture is wrong and has to change. But still the way they complexify the issue and they don't make it just about that one thing. It, my favorite movie or TV show is one where when I turn it off, whoever I watched it with, we want to talk about it.
Right.
And I feel like this is an episode where, yeah, it's not easy because there are so many layers. Like I said, it brings up the lisp issue comes up because our
Left palate.
heroes are
Yeah.
saying like, you can't commit surgery on a baby just because you think it's not as it should be. And the response is, well, but don't you do that to babies with cleft palates?
Right.
And that's where
I should have given some context
no,
when
it's
I
fine. I mean,
whipped out my vagina line, but
the line by itself is
my
great.
vagina line, that's what I whipped out. But yes, that is precisely it. There are other examples of what we do to quote unquote fix babies.
Right.
And in the Moclan culture, being a female is a condition, is how they
Right.
refer to it. It means they need to be fixed.
And I think what I like about this episode especially is in a totally different part of my life in grad school at one point, not to go too deep in my own background, but I used to be a pastor and I still am in a lot of ways.
Wow.
I'm very progressive, but I'm a pastor. And one of the things I heard in seminary once was the idea that religion is at its best when it asks hard questions.
Yes.
It's at its worst when it gives easy answers.
Oh, interesting.
I like that this episode raises hard questions without giving a simple answer.
Right.
And you're meant to kind of sit with that because, spoiler alert, it doesn't have a happy ending. At the end, the Moclan court decides that the surgery has to go forward. And in an interesting bit, we see the parent who was trying to stop it has this moment of kind of reconnecting with his partner and saying, well, this wasn't what I wanted, but we have to do our best to, love each other and love our child.
Yep.
And then gives the child a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer doll, which is a beautiful allusion to something that happened early in the episode. And I'll say Seth MacFarlane has this idea that in the future, all people care about is 1980s kids, the culture that people raised in the 1980s care about, which as a Gen Xer myself, I love.
Yeah, right. As they should.
Right.
Well, while we're talking about him for a moment, he really, I have always thought, frankly, I think of him as a potential douchebag. I don't know him, and I know a few people who have worked with him and don't think that, but he seems like a real big egomaniac. He takes on so much himself, and I think he's the opposite in this. He hands over this episode to Adrian Palicki, who plays his ex-wife, Commander Kelly Grayson, who, side note, got so much better from the first episode to the last one I watched. Oh my gosh, did she grow as an actress from this? But Seth MacFarlane really steps back. His character is there, and it's Ed Mercer's journey. But by this third episode, he says, I can't help. You guys take it over. And he really, I find Seth MacFarlane to be very collaborative, and we're all a team, and I'll give you the funniest punchline, and I'll give you the big speech. And
Right.
am I crazy? I was very shocked and impressed.
No, I think it's very true. And I think, like I said, I think that was my impression of him as well. And from the stuff he had put out before. And I don't think he's perfect. There's one very unfortunate irony about the show, which is that, as you said, he's working with his ex-wife, and they at times discuss should they get together. And, they decide as a couple that they shouldn't get together because the power imbalance between the two of them wouldn't make for a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
One of the actresses got into a relationship with Seth MacFarlane and then left the show because the power imbalance between show creator and actress wasn't working out very well.
The head of security, the beautiful young...
Yeah, that's why that character changes.
Well, she's too young for him anyway. I don't care for that. And I'm realizing, Matthew, I said douchebag to a pastor. There, I've done it.
I don't fucking care.
Oh!
Edit that as you want. No, that's...
After I said it, I was like, oh, he just said he's a pastor.
No, not a problem in the slightest. To me,
Okay.
yeah.
Progressive pastor.
Language of the people.
Great. Well, I also thought there were some things I read and I couldn't quite follow it, but this episode wasn't supposed to air this early in the season, right? It was supposed to air later. And that made sense because this was a very special episode of a comedy. And of course, it makes me think of Dudley getting molested on Different Strokes. Are you as old as me?
I am. I didn't know. I think I didn't love Different Strokes, so I didn't watch it that often. So I don't think I saw that. No, I think I did see that episode. Yeah, but
very special episode.
I certainly remember a lot of very special episodes of Family Ties, and
but they
good.
But they wait. Right? They get you in the groove so that late in the season, they have the freedom to say, this one isn't so funny. This one's going to really move you. And of course, my forever North Star is the Golden Girls. And does Rose have AIDS? That was episode 17 in season 5.
Yeah.
When they had the balls to say, okay, we're going to do a very special episode. Yeah. So it was crazy to me. 3rd episode. Did that have something to do with people don't know what the show is? Let's just hit them? Or
I think it probably was something like that. I think it was probably, again, I don't know much about the decision, but I certainly think that there was, I said, this tension of Seth MacFarlane really wanted to tell Star Trek fans, hey, I love what you love about Star Trek. I'm going to do that. And that maybe a lot of the reviews about kind of the frat boy humor and, oh, he's not taking this seriously, kind of like, I don't know if that got to them, or I don't know if there was, I don't remember. I mean, the show was originally made in 2017, I think, but, trans issues have been, and gender issues have been a part of our discussions for at least 10 years. I mean, decades and decades, but especially the last 10 years.
Right.
See, I don't remember if it was like there was something that happened to make that particular issue more prevalent, or
that could be.
But I imagine it was a combination of things. But certainly, I feel like this is one of the best episodes in the season, and so maybe they really wanted to be like, hey, we don't want everyone to have given up on the show by the time that this episode comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking you as if you were on the creative team. So a lot of this is just, do you think? I should say, do you think they moved it for this reason rather than, Matthew, explain to me why. Okay.
I think probably. I think all those things probably had a factor in it. Yeah.
I find it. My husband was like, "What are you watching?" Because I was laughing so hard, and I said, "The Orville." He goes, "Oh, I heard that was a stinker." Because my husband likes sci-fi and fantasy, and he never really tuned into it. And I said, "No, it's really funny." And then he comes back 10 minutes later. I'm sobbing. He's like, "Now what are you watching?"
The Orville.
Still the Orville. I mean, it's
and I think that's, to me,
it takes you on a ride.
If you can make me both laugh and cry in the same episode, that to me is the mark of a really great creator.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. All right, so the next one you had me watch was late in that season, still season 1, episode 12, called Mad Idolatry.
Yep.
And this is, let me read the blurb for those who are playing along. It is the 12th and final episode of the first season. The crew encounters a planet from another universe whose inhabitants start to worship First Officer Kelly Grayson as a goddess. Meanwhile, Grayson and Captain Ed Mercer consider getting back together. This was so interesting and pointed and smart. They are praying So she winds up on this planet. Kid falls down and gets hurt. She has a little gun that I'm sure appeared in other episodes. I was
Yeah.
not familiar with it. And it can heal your wounds.
Right.
It just takes away the wound. And so they believed she was a god. And then she disappeared, and they devoted all of their religious energy to worshiping the god of Kelly, who can heal wounds.
Yeah.
It was, it was, as a religious person, how did you feel about what they were saying?
So I really loved it because, first of all, I'm a religious person who's deeply, deeply critical of religion. Particularly in this day and age, but also, throughout history, I can see that, religion doing incredible harm, but also incredible good. And this, I love Star Trek. I love Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry was very famously an atheist. And he was very, very, one of his strongest precepts that comes through in original Star Trek and in some of the later is that religion is basically entirely foolish, and that to more primitive people, more advanced things seems like magic and religion, but that eventually, if you understand science and reason, all cause for religion will go away. And I think I don't object to that thinking in any way, shape, or form, but it isn't where I am. And I certainly feel like a lot of other, progressive types, or like in nerddom, like neo-paganism, or like kind of more modernistic approaches to religion have really become a big thing. Certainly there's a lot of Judaism within nerd circles and the like. And to me, this episode is one of the first ones where he says, as part of a love letter to Star Trek, I'm going to not critique Star Trek, but offer a different perspective. Because this episode is very much those ideas of people who don't understand the science of their world become, build this religion around it, etc. And very critical of that, I think, for very good reasons. But by the end, there's a sense of like, yeah, we went through a religious period and we grew out of it, but it wasn't the end of the world. And if you, Kelly, hadn't come, we would have built a mythology around something else. And it caused a lot of problems, but it also helped guide us in a lot of ways. And we just understand it as a natural part of culture. And,
well, religion gives people hope.
Yep.
And science can dash all your hopes. When science can accurately say, no, this is the odds of this happening, and because we know it from the data and the science, then there's no hope. So religion, I understand the need to say, I'm just going to put my faith in higher power so that I can have hope.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And I'm speaking as a non-religious person, as an agnostic, but I think it gets very pointed at the end, where basically, the religion is power to this planet, and
very much so.
Somebody murders somebody else because he wants to maintain the power and keep using religion to keep the people in control.
And he says it in a very, like, a way that probably sounds very familiar to a lot of us, because what he says is like, but without our control, the people, like, it starts from this perspective of the people need it. They need that to stay in control. And he ends up saying, but what about our power? They won't listen to us anymore. And then, because part of the idea is that they're in this different universe, and so time works very differently, and we get to see like 3,000 years of their development. And in a jump forward in time, you get scenes of like televangelists of Kelly and huge mega churches of Kelly and religious wars, and it is straight out of the headlines. I think that's where he's very clear of like, yeah, I'm pointing a finger right at what happens with the religion in the world today.
Yeah. And I think that, when you said it spans 3,000 years and time works differently, honestly, Matthew, that is a point at which normally I would tune out and say, I don't get it. Yeah. But the way that Orville approaches these subjects is so palatable to me, and it makes sense to me. And it's like, we're not going to get bogged down here, Mandy. Don't worry. We're just going to let you know time works differently, and we're going to show you. Yeah. And I followed all the logic. I wasn't lost. That is a rare statement. I have encouraged my listeners to drink every time I say, I didn't get that, or I got lost. But sorry, everybody, this episode of Make Me a Nerd, I feel like this was a great gateway for someone like me, And
well, I think part of that's because I feel like Seth MacFarlane has kind of an idea more closer to you and I, where he doesn't care about the science as much. Like people who listen to my podcast know I hate time travel plots.
Okay.
And mostly because I hate when they try to explain the logic of it. Because
Mhm.
there isn't any logic to it. Like, I just don't think it
Right.
makes logical sense. But like you said, in this one, and I think sometimes the episodes of Star Trek or other sci-fi that lose me is where they try to get you bogged down and say, oh, the science allows for A and for B, but not for C.
Mhm.
And I either just don't care or I don't get it or I don't think that they convince me.
Are
And
you
in
an
this,
Outlander fan?
I've enjoyed some of that show, yeah. And I think that's
Not bogged down in science, right? It's
no,
just
not at
about
all.
the romance and the characters and okay.
Yeah.
I
And
haven't tried it.
and I think kind of like here, like it's the same with like the Topa stuff. There is no explanation whatsoever of how the surgery works or what it's going to be.
Right.
And a lot of other things. It's like we have. They call it a quantum drive. It is 100% a warp space warp drive ripoff, just with the serial
Mhm.
numbers filed off. Never explain it. The word nacelles never comes up. Like the techno babble of Star Trek that lots of people love, and that's great. But it seems he's mostly decided I don't care about that. I just want
Yeah.
to tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, he's all about character, plot,
Mm-hmm.
ethical questions, you
Yep.
know. In fact, when Mercer and Grayson are like, "Yeah, let's get back together. I think this could work." And normally that's my jam.
Yeah.
A good Ross Rachel, will they or won't they? I didn't give a crap. I wanted to get back to the heart of the story with this other planet and how are they going to convince people that Kelly's not God, and that's crazy to me that I
Yeah.
wasn't interested in the romance. I also think they don't have any chemistry.
I think you're
Seth
probably right.
MacFarlane and Adrian Palicki.
And I'm not going to claim Seth is, you know, a someone who people are going to fall madly in love with, but I've been an Adrian Palicki fan since Friday Night Lights,
Yes.
which is one of my favorite TV shows ever. And the idea that she wouldn't have chemistry with someone is shocking to me because I think she's
Mhm.
so good in that regard. But yeah, in some ways, I think one of the best developed romantic relationships is between Bortus and Clyden. And you only saw two of the two mock
Right.
ones.
Right.
And they're not romantic in any ways we understand,
Right.
but they are very loving to each other until their relationship ends in an episode we'll talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, I'm like you. I love a good romance. I love a good will they, won't they. One of my favorite genres is high school kids where, yes, saving the world is difficult, but asking someone out to prom is even harder.
Mhm.
I love that genre. And
What is in that genre? Like,
oh,
what's your
I like a lot of animes fall into that genre.
okay?
There's a series of books that a lot of people love that the author has now taken a lot of stances that I don't agree with, so I don't talk about it anymore. But those books certainly would fall into that.
Okay.
You know, I think a lot of like a lot of young adult stuff and a lot of like other things like that. Certainly like the Vampire Diaries and stuff like that. You know, all the like high school hero
Right.
things.
Gotcha. I realize there's just so much I've missed. Not necessarily even sci-fi fantasy, but
Mhm.
there are so many beloved series. Supernatural was something I did on this show,
Mm.
and I I had no idea what it was. I was watching it and I was like, when does Superman show up?
Yeah.
And my husband was like, that's Smallville, you weirdo. And to me, I was like, but they're both CW hot guy. I was totally unaware of so many things that I'm loving. Winona Earp. Have you ever seen Winona Earp?
I haven't, but I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah. I mean, these are really fun, exciting, creative shows that
Yeah.
if had I not made this podcast, I never would know about. So
Yeah.
good for me. But let's stop down for a moment because we were talking about Adrian Palicki,
Mhm.
and I as well loved her on Friday Night Lights, and then I've never seen her since. She seemed like a very odd choice for this. And, you know, as a person you don't think of as a comedian
Right.
and then, so I did a little reading, found out Seth MacFarlane and she had been friends and he wanted her to do this and great. And then I looked up Scott Grimes,
Mhm.
who had also been friends with Seth MacFarlane, but Scott Grimes grew up near me. And Scott Grimes was a local celebrity for his angelic singing voice. Have you
Interesting.
ever looked him up when he was young?
No.
He had the most beautiful voice, and he went on community auditions, and he ran the table, and every week all of New England voted for Scotty Grimes to move on to the next week. It was our local Star Search.
Uh-huh.
I won't tell you my very painful story about how I did not win, but it's okay. It's okay.
That's a shame.
I'm over
Yeah.
it. But Scotty Grimes, like my mom and I would just watch him and quell over him. He was so adorable and talented. And then lo and behold, 20 years later, I was like, oh, he's on ER. Scott Grimes made it.
Yeah.
From New Hampshire. He made it. And then now he is on this show, and he's so perfect on TED. I can't encourage you to watch it enough. He and Adrian Palicki got married after filming Orville.
I had no idea.
They had a very short-lived, like 1-year marriage.
Sounds about right for Hollywood, but okay.
Right? Scott Grimes and Adrian Palicki, that's not a couple you would put together.
I wouldn't. But yeah, no, I didn't know any of his background. I will say that Seth MacFarlane loves making his stars sing if they're good at singing. And one of the episodes you saw, the actor who plays Bortus does. There's also an episode where I don't remember too many details. Basically, Scott Grimes goes to a planet that has something like karaoke. And so his character gets to sing. And you're right, he's also a phenomenal singer. I think he plays guitar too. Yeah.
I'm sure. He can do no wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was very connected to Scotty Grimes. Or always rooting for him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm glad I presented you with a fun fact of that short-lived marriage.
I didn't know that.
It just feels, I wrote, what? They were married for a year? What? With 18 exclamation points. Because I take really good notes.
I will say also about her, she was a star on a couple of seasons of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is very far down the Marvel rabbit hole. I don't expect that you'd have gone there. But I think that was also what may have given her some cred in the sort of geek world that makes her more. Yeah, because I think going from Friday Night Lights to a Star Trek ripoff is a big jump. But with Marvel in the middle, it kind of smooths it over a little bit. Yeah.
And again, she really comes into her own. But that first episode, I was not a fan. Not that my opinion matters. And then the last episode you had me watch, now we've gone to season 3, episode 5, A Tale of Two Topas. Topa is the son now of Bortus and Clyden. And it says, buried secrets resurface when Topa prepares for the Union Point entrance exam and begins to question himself.
Yeah.
These little summaries are not colorful enough, but as a mom of a teen, I was so moved. Little Topa is very, very depressed and very unhappy and searching and longing and has no idea why, just isn't feeling comfortable in his own skin. And Kelly is ripped apart by it and wants to help and wants to explain, you were born female and your dad's changed your gender. And it's another ethical debate. Do you tell this little boy or do you let him live? Oh, so we found out in the first one about a girl. Clyden admits he was born female.
Right.
I mean, I was gobsmacked when he said it. It was like right before a commercial and he said, because I was born a female. And I gasped. I couldn't believe how invested I was.
Yeah. And I think that was, again, one more way of complicating the issue a little bit more because it gives Clyden some personal stakes in it because Clyden is clearly sort of the antagonist. But until the end of the last episode, I don't think he ever truly becomes a villain because he clearly has a point of view that makes a lot of sense to him. And I think in some ways he's meant to represent the, it's an old joke that like homophobes will often be the ones who like you kind of look at and like, are you sure you weren't a little bit in the closet yourself? And like sometimes that's a stereotype. Sometimes I think there's a lot of truth of the people who thought they might be something, but were like, no, I can't do that. I can't be that person are the ones who will fight most against anyone else being that person, both because and the more benevolent view of it is because they had to decide not to and they want to help others make the same decision. But also probably because sometimes seeing someone else do what they thought they couldn't makes them regret or makes them jealous, And like, I think in Clyden, you have all of that.
Yeah. He says, I love my child more than anything in the world. And by the end, he forsakes his child and walks away.
Right.
because he's so opposed to her becoming a her.
Right. Because by the
And
end, they've decided to let her have the surgery to change herself back to be the woman
right.
she always is.
And everybody sacrifices. It's so moving. The doctor, Penny Johnson, an actress I've loved forever and ever, she can do no wrong for me, plays the doctor on the ship. And she's like, I'll give up my doctor's license to help this girl.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how once Topa says, I was born a girl, I want to be a girl again, everybody switches pronouns immediately.
Oh, I'm so glad
Everyone
you picked up on that. Yep.
Yeah, everyone starts calling her her, and she's depressed and she wants to be herself again. And that's so hard for Clyden, who desperately wants her to remain a boy.
Yep.
Without getting too global or political or anything. You know, I understand the world is struggling with pronouns, and it's but oh God, I'm sorry, I'm going to get emotional, but like, who cares what our pronouns are? We're all people. Let's all just love each other. And if you want to be a he, she, or a they, them, be that. And if you can't get past it, screw you. It's like, that's what this episode did to me. It was like just bringing up all of the, pray the gay away bullshit.
Yeah, no, it hits so hard. And my own pronouns are they, them. And it's an issue that's very close to me personally. And also a lot of my good friends are transgender. And and honestly, like as a pastor, some of the hardest things I did was sit with parents who has trigger warning for a few moments, but whose child had either harmed themselves or unalived themselves, in part because of those parents not accepting them as the gender they were. And the fact that they made it about, they brought in the issue of self-harm because Topa's considering that. They brought up this episode is a lot of like transgender organizations and stuff like that list this episode as like one of the best ones to watch to see.
Good.
Like this really got so much recognition, and I'll say part of what makes it, I think. And I only had you watch the first and the last. There are 2 more episodes about this issue with Mocking culture that help to gradually bring it along, and you get to see more of Helena and like a whole colony of women and things like that. But I think one of the differences, and part of what Seth MacFarlane did, was he said for this one he took his script and he reached out to transgender friends of his and said, "Hey, would you read the script?" And they gave him feedback. And
he had said there were things I would do differently about that first one, and I feel like he got to rectify anything or dive deeper, whatever it was he was thinking, oh, I didn't pull off what I wanted to there. He did it in this one. It was so, I'm sorry, I'm getting so emotional. It was such a moving episode. And with the world being what it is, it hit me so hard. And you even gave me a trigger warning in the email saying, these are not light, there's real dark or heavy stuff here. And this child actress, Imani Pullum, plays Topa, and it was a transformative performance. She really seemed, not that gender matters, but her voice changed, her walk changed, her everything changed when she was male Topa in a depression. And then only in the last few scenes is she female and free, and her performance was dazzling. I don't know if she got an Emmy nomination. She deserved one. It was really exciting to watch a child tap into those things like that.
I am going to look forward to see the next thing that actress does because she's so good. And one of the groups that I saw some feedback about the show from was from parents of transgender children. And there was one letter that was written to Seth MacFarlane that was published that really hit me hard, where it talked about how like it was a father talking. They're saying he was afraid he was going to lose his son. But once he saw his daughter and how happy she was, he realized what he was actually losing, that he had already lost his child to some extent, because he didn't notice as much like, oh, she looks so different because she's dressing female. It's that she's happy. He realized he'd been a year or more since he'd heard her laugh and seen her smile. And
oh God, it kills me.
Yeah. I get teared up too. It's funny. And here's the thing. If I had told you Seth MacFarlane was going to make you sob, like you would have told, like,
no, I think it's also the state of the world that
Yeah.
I'm so scared. So it hit me harder than it would have had I watched it a year and a half ago, where it still would have been a moving story about an important issue, but I would have felt more hopeful. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Well, the show really is not funny, this episode, I have to say.
Mhm.
They gave up on humor. And I was wondering if that was the trend of the show as it grew, or if this was just an episode where humor would have been too difficult to cram in there. Do you have a sense of that?
I think it's more the second.
I hope.
I
Because
think so.
I missed the relief of laughing a little.
I think to some extent, Seth MacFarlane felt with this episode, I really need to step back and let others guide me. And I think there's something really powerful about, hey, if you are an ally to a different community and you want to write their story, no one's saying you shouldn't, but get their impact, you know?
Right.
There's a sci-fi author, I can't reveal the name yet, but the book hopefully will be coming out soon, where he was writing, I'm also disabled, I have a prosthetic leg, and,
Okay.
and the author was writing about a character who had a prosthetic leg. And I know someone who's one of his like beta readers, and so she suggested to me, because he specifically said, I want someone with a prosthetic to read this chapter and tell me how does it work. And I kind of gave some feedback. I'm understanding that feedback was incorporated. Like, I think that's great. And
yes.
yeah,
And
I definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, I just want to say, as a person in Hollywood, you said something that bumped for me. You said, there's no reason you can't tell these stories. Hollywood disagrees with you strongly, right? So I cannot tell a story where from a male perspective or somebody other than me, that's where Hollywood is. It's so scared of a lady wrote that and she, or I can't have a main character that is not white per se, because how would I understand that journey? So I'm glad someone like Seth MacFarlane could tell this story, and I'm utterly thrilled that he reached out and got the input and got the actual experience.
Yeah.
But, and I know I'm not Seth MacFarlane's level, so therefore Hollywood wouldn't
Not
accept
yet.
not yet, but yeah, I do find it frustrating that it's like, you can't tell that story. You didn't go through that. Well, no, but I'm a writer. That's,
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of complexity to that, which we could probably do 5 other episodes on. But yeah, I definitely think it's something like this, where it's like a one particular episode of something. Yeah, especially because he has a perspective on it, and but the fact that he was willing to, and it is still somewhat, it's less taupe. It is always about Ed's reactions to the story. And so I think that's what he's writing. Right? Like I think it'd be very different if he'd made Topa the main character of the show from the beginning. Right. But yeah, I think that again, you're much more in the Hollywood world than I am, but in general, the shows that I like most, it probably doesn't have just one writer. It's probably a pretty diverse set of writers, because they can go back and forth and they can have these different experiences.
Absolutely. We are coming to the end of our time here. I can't believe it. And I wrote, I know 2 actors in this episode. That was very exciting.
Oh,
so in the 3rd episode, the naked guy is an old colleague of mine.
I was saying that plot line was a little bit humorous, but it was pretty much all at the start and then didn't go anywhere.
It just didn't go anywhere. I wanted them to pick it back up as comic relief, and maybe they shot 2 more scenes because he was listed in the top credits. So I was like, oh, Andy's in this, and then he only had that 1 scene, and so they probably had 2 scenes that they cut. And then a friend from college, they were like, what is it, Corporal? And he was like, oh, the Flibbity Jews and the files, and he was in the episode, and I was so excited. And then they also they call all people above them sir in their hierarchy on the ship. And do you know that's a Scientology thing?
No, really?
I'm obsessed with Scientology. Obsessed.
Okay.
I cannot read enough about it. I think it's the craziest, creepiest. Come at me, Scientologists. I'm so freaked out by it. And yeah, everyone above you is a sir, male, female, child.
Interesting.
Because, we're all just even though I'm a 7-year-old girl, I could be the doctor if I'm a Scientologist. I mean, it's a deep dive for But I was wondering if that was a little Seth MacFarlane dig at Scientology.
I don't think so. Actually, it may well have been. I do know that in Star Trek, for the most part, female officers are also called sir.
Oh, well
with,
then,
with a noted
that's where-
exception, the noted exception of Captain Janeway, who's the captain of the Voyager, her own ship. So yeah, it may have also been a reference to that. I don't know. Seth MacFarlane could be a Scientologist. Half of Hollywood is. So I don't know. You know?
No, he's not. No, he's not.
Oh, good.
Yeah, bite your tongue.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I'm gonna do my quick bit of business,
Sure.
and then I'm gonna ask you to tell everybody about your podcast and where they can find you, if that's fair.
Sounds good to me.
Here we go. Make Me a Nerd is a production of True Story FM, engineering by the peerless Pete Wright. My theme song is Wonderstruck by Jane and the Boy. And you can get me on Instagram at Mandy_Kaplan_Clavens, both with Ks. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a review. Hit the write a review button under the stars and reach out and join the conversation there. And if you want even more, go to makemeanerd.com and hit the join button. You'll get your episodes ad-free and early and more access to me and some bonus content. We have interviews that the regular folk just can't hear. You got to be a member. So next week, I will be doing, in the next episode, I think, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Never seen a moment of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Where have I been living? So we are doing season 2, episode 3, season 4, episode 10, season 6, episode 7, with Pete Wright and Kyle Olson from the True Story family, who have both been on this podcast, and they know me well enough that I believe they included the musical episode within those assignments.
I was just looking up to double check that I thought that was the episode in season 6, and it's funny because when you asked me a long time ago about the high school kids who were also saving the world genre, the minute I finished, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I say Buffy? So I'm so glad you're saying it. It's one of the absolute best of the, I have to kill all these demons, but in time to finish my math homework kind of show.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay. Where can everybody listen to you and find you and reach out to you? Plug away, Matthew Fox.
So my podcasts are also on the True Story FM network of podcasts. So if you're on the website of Mandy's podcast, you can find me through there. You can also go to theethicalpanda.com. That will take you to the page for both of my podcasts. Superhero Ethics, as it sounds like, is about sort of ethical questions in fandom. And we've decided that a whole bunch of things can qualify as superheroes. So we do everything from Cobra Kai to we've done some stuff about like video games and card games like Magic the Gathering and stuff. We've done a lot of science fiction, a lot of fantasy. We've been recently doing some episodes on anime, which has been really fun because I'm not an anime person at all. And I've been kind of, my co-host is Japanese American, so he's been kind of slowly introducing me to that. And then my other podcast is Star Wars Generations, and we still talk about this stuff. It's a little less focused on just the ethical stuff. It's focused a lot on its own characters and dialogue. We talk about the space battles that are fun and the lightsaber battles that are cool. Again, though, it's that same ethos. There was one of the 1-star reviews that I got was because that I misnamed a creature we saw the skeleton of in the background of something that was never actually named in the movie, but was named in like later books.
Dare you? Yes.
And I wear that with pride. I was like, that's how you know with this kind of podcast. If you're the person who doesn't get that right, but wants to talk about Luke's journey, and wants to talk about, The Last Jedi and not deal with a bunch of people hating you for it, that's the podcast for you. And it's called Star Wars Generations because I'm Gen X. I'm someone who grew up with the original movies.
Uh-huh.
One of my co-hosts is Millennial, who grew up with the prequels, and one of my co-hosts is Gen Z, and she grew up with the Clone Wars TV show. And
fun!
Like that. And so we have a lot of fun. Instead of it being like, no, you don't know real Star Wars or that kind of nonsense. It's really about just like finding love of the shows and movies from all different perspectives.
Is it the kind of thing where everybody thinks the Chinese food where they grew up is the best Chinese food?
Somewhat, but it's also more like, oh, they grew more ginger in your area, so your Chinese food has more ginger. That's cool. It's really about like
Way to jump on my analogy.
Yeah,
Thank
right?
you.
Half my family's Jewish, so the Chinese food thing was very easy for me.
It's very real and very deep. Yes.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, I am the former New Yorker who has spent the rest of my life trying to find good bagels, pizza, and Chinese food after leaving New York City and not doing well.
Godspeed.
Right?
Yes.
When a Jewish deli offers you a bagel, a pastrami with mayo, you know to run. Yeah,
Not going to happen.
But yeah, so it's just kind of it's a fun podcast. Those two are both. We have weekly content. We have bonus content for members as well because membership has its privileges. But we just have a lot of fun, and I think they're great episodes. And I would love to have you on sometime to talk about the ethics of chicklet and or anything like that.
Be honored, absolutely honored.
Sounds great.
Except I don't like chicklet, but we'll find something.
Oh, you specifically have that on your
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I know. It's more representative because
Okay.
I couldn't use an actual title of a book.
That's
You know,
fair. That's fair.
so it just
Real Housewives, whatever it is.
yes. Well, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a safe place for me to cry. And until next time, everybody, thanks for listening.